What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to have you guys here as we get ready for another episode. Big episode on tap today. A lot to talk about, wrapping up this Georgia-South Carolina final, as you guys can see on the screen here, 24-14, Dogs on top. Hey, at the end of the day, that's what we're glad about, is Georgia is on top of this game. But my goodness, it was not necessarily the most exciting and most thrilling game throughout all of it. And there is a lot that we've got to talk about. We're going to talk about all of it. Offense, defense, everything that was going on first half, second half, because in all actuality, that was the difference in this football game, was the difference in the first half and the second half. And that's a big talking point that we're going to get into in this episode. Overall, though, hey, Georgia might not be necessarily playing like a championship caliber team yet, but right now, nobody is. Nobody in the country really is acting in that way, where they're acting like they want to be a top team. Not a lot's really changed up in the top five for that reason. I've got my top five that we're going to go through here in just a little bit. But Georgia not necessarily playing up to the standard that we want to be playing at yet. I'm sure that Kirby Smart would tell you that. But I don't think anybody is. And the good thing about it is, we've still got a lot of football to play. This season's not over in week 3. A lot of football left to play. And at the end of the day, champions find a way to win. And Georgia did that today, because in years past, go back to that 2019 season that we played South Carolina, we did not find a way to win that football game at all. We lost it. Matter of fact, didn't get any better after that. We had that same exact opportunity to do what we did in 2019 in this game. We did the same thing. We missed field goals, did not hit on guys like we were supposed to, couldn't run the ball effectively. Next thing you know, Georgia did their job, and we won the game by 10. We're going to dive into all of these things. It was a big game in the sense that the only thing that I was glad about in this game up to the half was I knew, at least for the second half, we're going to have a lot of fans in the stands, because the first half of the game, and it was wet, it was rainy, it was not the most beautiful game to be at, but it made the fans stick around, which I think was a good thing as far as atmosphere goes. Now, you might be saying, who cares about the fans if Georgia's not winning the football game? Maybe so, but I think the atmosphere is a fun thing to have, and the fact that they had it deep into the fourth quarter there too, I think that's a big deal to me, at least. Again, might not be a big deal to you guys, but nonetheless, Georgia wins it 24-14. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to get into all the things that there are. Next week, you get a little bit of an easier game. But let's first of all talk about this. We've got some injury updates to get to, some that we don't have answers to yet, some that we already kind of know what's going on. Kendall Milton goes out of this game with an MCL injury. Again, don't know the extent of it. We're going to see. Amarius Mims goes out. He comes back with crutches and a boot on his leg. Don't know what that means. This could be a longer time. Javon Bullard, he did warm up in practice beforehand, or in warm-ups, I should say. He looked good from everything that I had seen, but they still didn't think he was quite where he needed to be able to truly go into this game. I know that he was probably itching to get in this game, and there were times there we missed him. We missed him a lot out there and wanted him in this game. But again, understandably so, we need him to be healthy deeper into the season more than just this game. And this game matters. This opens up SEC football play right here. And you want to win these games, especially against the SEC. So it mattered. But didn't get to see him in this game. I would be surprised if we don't see him next week against UAB, just because how much it seemed like he was able to go in warm-ups, but just not quite where they wanted him to be as far as game ready to go. Ladd obviously still out in this game. Did not see him. Again, don't know when we're going to see him. And the thing about it to me is not seeing Ladd like in pads and stuff, that to me just makes it even further away. At least with Javon, you saw him in pads, had a helmet and everything. He looked ready to go for all intents and purposes, but was not and did not go. So, again, I'm just not sure about Ladd. We miss him too, and I think that he is a key component to this offense that is lacking right now, and I think that he can make a big difference when he does come back. And that's one of the reasons that I hate for him not to be here. But I think when he does, all the difference is going to be made in that on some of the stuff that we're lacking on offense right now. We still got a lot of stuff to figure out, but at the end of the day, we're going to talk about some of those things here. So That's pretty much all I've got as far as injuries. There may have been one or two other guys that went out. I know Brock earlier in the game had gone out at some point, and Brock so far over the past couple of weeks has not necessarily looked like Brock. Had a couple of drops last week. He still today he at least came back and he showed you that, hey, I'm still somewhat unhuman, because he would get hit and just keep going, keep churning. But I think he's dinged up a little bit, and he's trying to make it through that, which is a good thing. We need Brock Bowers all the way down. Even if he's not catching the ball, he's making a difference in pass blocking, in run pro. So he's doing a very good job, at least at that. Even though he's not putting up 100 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns, that's okay. At least if he's doing the things quietly in the shadows that most people are like, where is he? He's there, but he's doing his job on another facet that's helping these other guys be successful. That's one thing we've got to notice with some of this too, is not everything that you see is something that isn't going on. Now, that's kind of confusing and complicated when I say it that way. But just because Brock's not getting the ball, just because you don't see him physically with the ball in his hand, does not mean that he is not making a difference on the perimeter when we're running to the outside, or on the line when we're pass blocking up there. So it's different, not necessarily seeing him get a bunch of touches, but at the end of the day, if he's doing his job in that way and making everybody else successful, we have to be okay with that. So glad to have you guys here again. We've got a lot to get into in this game. I've got a bunch of notes here that I want to run through before we get to the end of this thing, but I do appreciate each and every one of you guys being here this week. And I just wanted to say, if you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure I'm trying to find my button here. If you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. Leave a comment if you would. Anybody listening on podcast, hit that 5-star rating. I greatly appreciate it. And if you want to support the show, Patreon/Dawg Talk. I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's get into this game. Okay, evidently my sound wanted to do its own thing. So Georgia coming into this one, heavy favorite, like a 27, almost a 4-touchdown favorite coming into this football game. Again, I didn't look at weather, didn't think anything about the weather as far as coming into this game, how things would play out. Rain does make a difference in the game, but the thing about it is it makes a difference for both teams. It's not just Georgia all of a sudden can't play football. It's not just South Carolina all of a sudden can't. It's both. Georgia might not be able to run the ball effectively. South Carolina might not be in the same way. Georgia might not be able to throw the ball. We might have to put it on the ground more, because more than likely your other team's going to have to do that too. So whether I think it does affect the game as far as, are there going to be a lot of points scored? Most of the time, probably not. Is there going to be a lot of passing yards? Most of the time, I think that kind of takes that away. It negates it a little bit, because it's just harder to catch the ball when it's raining, when you're throwing it up in the air. Same thing as spinning it when you're throwing it. So didn't think that would play as much of a factor, but again, I didn't really look ahead and think, okay, the weather's going to be a deal in this game. But regardless, Georgia came out not really flat. Is kind of the way I want to look at this. And I know if you look at the score, again, 14-3 is the deficit at the half. We look at it and we go, man, we really weren't doing anything in the first half. Actually, it's quite the opposite. Georgia was doing a lot in the first half and was pretty successful at the first half, but we just came up empty-handed when we got in the red zone. Right now, I think what we're starting to see is not necessarily a moving the ball issue as much as we got into the red zone, couldn't do anything. Even against Ball State last week, we got in the red zone, missed a field goal. We've got a field goal kicking issue that in the past we haven't really had. And I don't doubt that this can get fixed. I don't doubt even the kid that's kicking it right now can get it fixed here in the next couple of years. And I hope it's a much sooner than that. I hope it's the next couple of weeks. But he sticks around. He can be here for a number of years. But Georgia gets its first test in this. South Carolina comes in. Their hair's on fire. They're ready to play football. And competitively, again, they've lost to North Carolina starting the season. So they are looking to bounce back off of everything that they have behind them and start getting things moving forward. Again, they ended the season very, very good last year. It doesn't mean that before that they weren't. But they came into this game ready. Shane Beamer had his guys ready. He said that at the end. He gave kudos to Georgia, but he also tried to take kudos for his own team as well. And say, listen, I think we're not far away from being able to compete and beat a Georgia. Georgia in the end, again, 24-14 is the victory here, but it was pretty scarce through the first half of this football game. Some of the things that I kind of wanted to see, and this isn't getting into the keys of the game just yet, but some of the things that I did want to see in this football game as we got into it. Let me see. I want to look and just see if I was trying to figure out if I wanted to pull up first half stuff or totals. I think we might do like totals. I take it back. I think we're gonna do the halves and break them down by the halves. But anyways, in this game, some of the stuff that I wanted to see, again, not necessarily getting to the keys, but with Dejon Edwards, we figured he was going to be coming back in this game. Does he make a difference? Is he effective in this football game? And he was. He was healthy, looked good. One of the things we talked about coming into this game is we need some life. We need some spark in that running back room because Kendall Milton can be that, but he's still not 100%, and you saw that in this game. He goes out, again, battling an MCL issue. Broderick Robinson comes in, tries to, get a little bit of life going. Just didn't really see it. Cash running the ball at first, didn't really have a lot of life to him. In the end, later into the game, that life started to kind of come alive. Dylan Bell, seeing him, that was another question we had. Are we going to see him at running back anymore? And we did. And he brought a lot of that lightning. But having Dejon Edwards back was a huge difference for this Georgia football game because he is that lightning that we have been missing. And I think in the same way that we're missing Lab McConkey in the wideouts room, we had been missing Dejon. We got Dejon back. And last week, Georgia couldn't even rush total in the game, could not rush for 100 yards. And in this game, Dejon Edwards rushes for over 100 yards. If that tells you just how much we have been lacking and missing him in the running back room. So it was great to see him back. Dylan Bell, again, being effective back there in the backfield as well. Malachi Muse, this was something I wanted to see. Are we going to continue to see his dominance? Very, very quiet week. Very quiet week for him. No punt returns. Again, they did well punting the ball. Not really allowing us an opportunity to really get anything going with them. But other than that, nothing. No receptions on the night. Unless I'm completely missing something here. But I don't see that. No receptions on the night for him. No rushes. Again, no returns on the kick seal. So I don't know if that was a lot of, hey, they're preparing for him, or we just didn't really have a game plan necessarily prepared for him, or if it was just, hey, he was covered well. That's very well possible in this as well. Blocking issues with wide receivers, one of the other things we wanted to see kind of get cleaned up in this game. First half, so-so. It was kind of again, 50-50. Some things look good and other things not necessarily. But then the second half, Georgia really started to come alive. And again, we're about to look at these first half and second half stats, and we're going to talk about those here in just a second. And then one of the last things also we want to see improve. Let's see. Improve in the second half? Oh, no. That was the blocking issue. So here we go. Should we be able to get quarterback? We should be able to get to Spencer Rattler through that offensive line of South Carolina. And we did. First half of this game, we're going to talk about here in just a second. I know I keep saying that, and I wish I'd stop. But in the end, we looked really good. And let's kind of get into the differences in the halves right here and see. And this is a tale of two halves is kind of what I name it here. Because in the first half, offensively for Georgia only got 168 yards in the first half of this football game, giving up 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. Georgia had not had a single touchdown in the first half of this football game. Again, the one field goal. But the problem was we're driving down, getting into the red zone, missing field goals. I think it happened twice in the first half. I should have looked to see if the halves were different. I know we missed one in the first half. Can't remember if that second one came later in the third quarter or if that happened in the second quarter. But I think they were both in the first half. But missing field goals when you get in the red zone, not being able to turn points into anything or those drives into points, that's an issue. Again, 168 yards. The yardage comparison was not that big of a difference. Again, offensively, we get 168 yards. We only give up 180 yards, but we give up 2 touchdowns, one of which, I saw a hold on the play. They didn't. So, again, it's not up to me whether I see the holds or not. The referees have to actually throw a flag for it to truly be one. Doesn't matter what we think in the stands. Doesn't matter what we think at the house watching the game either. Looked like a hold. Wasn't. They got a touchdown. We had 6 opportunities, 6 guys around him to tackle him and stop that from happening, and we didn't do it, and he still scored. So, we give up 180 yards in the first half, and we only gain 168 yards. These are the comparisons here, stat comparisons. Spencer Rattler in the first half goes 16 for 18, 152 yards, and a touchdown. That all in the first half. Nearly perfect, 16 for 18, nearly 160 yards through the air. Almost all of the yardage in this game came from Spencer Rattler in the first half, really the entire game for him. And then 1 touchdown in the first half. Georgia only allowed, well, we're going to get to that here in a minute. Carson Beck, this was the other part, only averages 5.1 yards an attempt in the first half. this is the stat that I was slightly blown away about because I thought this was going to be a lot different, and it really wasn't. In the first half, Carson Beck goes 13 for 18, only 5 incompletions, 98 yards. 98 yards is what he has. Right at 100 yards, but 13 for 18. So his completions were nice. But the thing about it was, one of the things we needed to see, and I've got this that we're going to go through here in a minute, halftime points that I wanted us to see and improve on. The reason he's 13 for 18 and the same reason he only has 98 yards is he would not look down the field. We had 2 or 3 plays with dudes running down the seam wide open, and he wouldn't look downfield to throw it to him. He's not making that check. He's not getting to that progression, making that check and seeing, okay, I have this check down here, but let me look over here first. Oh, look at there. Arian Smith is running wide open down the right side of the field. We had a big issue of just locking down to our first couple of reads and not getting out of those, checking and then coming back down to that check down. I don't know what the deal was with it, but it wasn't happening in the first half. Again, he only has 5 incompletions, 13 for 18, pretty good, 98 yards, didn't make a mistake, but we're not really moving the ball effectively like I figured we should be in that first half, and I thought that was an issue. Second half, though, you can see the complete turnaround here on the screen if you guys are watching on YouTube. Second half, we get 290 yards of offense while only allowing 129 yards, and also 3 touchdowns on our offense and 3 interceptions for our defense. So it was a complete flip of the switch in this one. But the stat line for Carson Beck is what kind of blows my mind in this that we're about to get to. Spencer Rattler in the second half, 6 for 24, completely different. 16 for 18, 152 in the first. In the second half, 6 for 24, only 104 yards, and threw 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter alone. 3 total interceptions, but 2 in that fourth quarter alone. Carson Beck in the second half, again, let me just reiterate the first half for a second. 13 for 18, 98 yards, first half. Second half, 14 for 17. Not a lot of difference there. 13 for 18, 5 incompletions. 14 for 17, 3 incompletions. 2 different. Here's the difference. 171 yards for him through the air in the second half. No touchdowns through the air. All 3 touchdowns for Georgia came on the ground in this game. All 3 of them did, and we'll get to that here in just a second. But not terribly different as far as his passes go and his completions and his attempts from the first half to the second half. 5 incompletions in the first half, 3 incompletions in the second half. So he had a great game overall, but that yardage is the big difference. Right at 100 yards in the first half, but throws for almost 175 yards in the second half because he started looking downfield, which is what blew my mind. Georgia only allowed 32 yards of defense in the third quarter alone. While gaining nearly 200, was at 197. At one point in time in this game, Georgia had gained like 269 yards in the second half while only giving up about 54. But in the third quarter alone, they had only given up 32 yards while gaining 197 yards. In that third quarter, that time of possession was a huge difference for Georgia. Georgia had the ball 10 and a half minutes, only giving South Carolina the ball 4 and a half minutes in this game, which was impeccable. And a lot of that is because when Georgia came back out onto the field, they had a game plan in place. And that game plan in place was to take over this football game. And Georgia did exactly that. And Georgia did a great job at it. As soon as we got the ball back at the half, Kirby had talked about this coming into the half, was we were hoping to get points there before the half, couldn't move the ball effectively because then we get the ball back after the half. Well, if Georgia had scored before the half, let's just say a touchdown to make this a 14-10 game, come out with the ball and play the way we did in the third quarter, this game is completely different. Again, you're talking about 31-14 just in that alone if we had scored before the half, but no telling what would have happened in the second half of this football game. But we get into the totals throughout the entire game. 458 total yards in this game. 269 of those came through the air. 189 of that came on the ground. 118 yards of that went to Dejon Edwards. Like we talked about before, we needed that spark in the running back room. Couldn't even rush the ball for 100 yards last week against Ball State. Dejon Edwards come back, does it by himself. 118 yards by himself and a touchdown on the ground. All 3 of those touchdowns, like we talked about, came on the ground. Some of the stuff I wanted to see, at least as far as the 2 halves go, I wanted to see Georgia come into this game in the second half. Our offensive line was getting absolutely crushed. Absolutely crushed. There's no real easy way for me to say it other than saying it like that. We couldn't block well for our runners. We could not block very well For pass pro, Carson Beck was having to get out a lot more than I really anticipated or wanted him to. So we needed to block better overall. Carson also had to look downfield was one of the other things that I said at the half that we've got to improve on. If he keeps making these checkdowns, not going to happen. And then last was the defense has to get home on pass rush. So many times we were rushing and getting to Spencer Rattler, some of which was causing a little bit of strife for him, but for the most part, he was able to flush the pocket. Wasn't really rushing for a lot of yards. Like we said, coming into this game, didn't anticipate him doing a Tim Tebow or Cam Newton where he's running all over you. No. That wasn't the game plan in here. It was just that he can flush the pocket and extend a play. Georgia wasn't doing a very good job as far as getting home. Once we got to him, we weren't taking him down at first. Second half, all three of these things got checked off. O-line started blocking great. We started running better. O-line started blocking great and giving Beck time. Beck at that point also stopped looking at his first reads and started throwing the ball downfield, opening the field up and opening the game up, also opening up the run game even more. And then our defense was getting home. At the end of the night, I think we ended up with 3 sacks on the night, 3 of them. And all 3 of which, let's see, the courtesy, there were 3 different guys that got them. Jamon Dumas-Johnson. Pop got 1. Nazir Stackhouse and Michael Williams. We also had 7 tackles for loss in this game. So made a big difference. Made a very, very big difference being able to get this done. Again, 13-10 was the difference in first downs in the half. Georgia was actually leading that. Third downs, it was 3 for 7 Georgia, 3 for 5 for South Carolina. Georgia did get 1 fourth down conversion on that. First half, Georgia also held the ball longer, 17 minutes, 9 seconds, South Carolina 12-51. So it wasn't a huge difference. Like I said, I think the way that South Carolina is going to beat Georgia is holding on to the football. They didn't have to do that. That's not the way that ended up, where they were having to hold on to the ball the entire time to win this football game. Georgia, again, ends up with the most time in this one. Thought I had my time there, but I don't. But Georgia ended up with the ball more in this game than South Carolina did. So after we checked off all of those things from the first half into the second half, all of a sudden Georgia starts rolling. Again, 21 unanswered points in the second half of this game. 14 in the third and 7 in the fourth. This is how Carson Beck ended up on the night. 27 for 35, 77.1% is what that is. Right at 270 yards, 269 yards, averaging about 7.7 yards an attempt. I know at one point he was averaging 5.1, like we talked about in the first half. Yeah. But then at some point in the third quarter, when we really started to open it up in that second half, he was averaging just over 11 yards an attempt. Obviously, that number, once you average it out from the first half to the second, that's about where you get on that. Dejon Edwards rushes the rock 20 times, 118 yards, 1 touchdown. 118 yards, 1 touchdown. Huge game. Huge game for Dejon Edwards. We needed him. We needed the spark. We needed all of these things to start going, and they finally did. Let's talk about Mike Bobo. Because I came on here just a couple of weeks ago, and I said we've got to lay it off on Mike Bobo. We're not opening up the playbook. We're not throwing that tater deep. Things are not looking like a Todd Monken offense that we're used to over the past couple of years. Understand that. I said, but we got to chill out. We're playing Ball State. We're playing UT Martin. We get into the South Carolina game. On Twitter, Facebook, everywhere that you look, on social media, it was time to fire Mike Bobo, and it was time to fire Carson Beck. And there was one point in time in this football game right before the half that I went, there may be some validity to this. It may be time to – we're not just going to fire Mike Bobo. We're not going to leave him on the tarmac, as my buddy Tyler says, like Alabama did with Lane Kiffin. We're not going to leave him on the tarmac headed somewhere and go from there. Now, I think if we did go somewhere and just absolutely could not move the ball at all, that could be in question, Make him get a ride home at least. But at one point in time in this game, I was really going, man, what are we doing? We cannot move the football. We're not doing anything offensively that's impressive. We're throwing screens. We're throwing short passes here. Part of that, I think, was Carson Beck needed to look down. I did wonder at one point in time, is the spark that we need on this offense right now, putting Brock Vandegrift in there, at least he's going to look downfield and throw it deep a few times. I know that Carson is the guy. Kirby's told you that. Coming out of the half, Kirby had that in the interview there on the sideline, and he said, listen, I told him one play at a time. We have to be poised. You know, I think a lot of us were expecting, myself included, he's going to go in there and chew these guys out and tell them they got to figure it out. Not saying that didn't happen. That probably did when you're down 14-3 against an SEC foe that you have handled easily the past couple of years. But coming out of that, it was we got to be poised, one play at a time, real simple. And that's what Georgia did coming out in that second half. I mean, again, Carson started looking downfield. The offensive line started blocking. Run game started to open up even more. Dejon had a great game back. We needed that spark. We had him. We got it. So it was fun to see. Mike Bobo, sometimes I'm questioning it too. Why are we having so many screens? Why are we this? Why are we that? I wondered, are we opening up the playbook? Are we just keeping it tight because we're playing nobody? Well, we get into South Carolina. We're not winning this football game. We're down 14-3. I don't know if all of a sudden in the second half it was an opening of a playbook as much as it was, all right, Carson, you have to look downfield. And second of all, when we get in the red zone, we have to score. We have to get points off of it, as opposed to we get down here and do nothing, or we get down here and we miss a field goal. Right now, the two issues that I genuinely think we have, I don't think right now I'm going to temper the expectations on Mike Bobo. I think he's doing an okay job. By the end of this, we need him to be doing a great job if you want to truly have a three-peat. I don't think that right now even needs to be a conversation. And I keep looking on social media, and I see these guys saying, oh, this team's not a three-peat team. They can't do nothing. They don't deserve to be the number one team. First of all, I don't know who behind them does, because nobody played like they wanted to be the top team in the country this week. Nobody. Even some of the teams that were 10, 11, and 12 that are down even further, they're not playing like they want to be there either. Second of all, it's the third week of the season. We got a lot of football to play. And third, I don't know if you guys know this or not, Georgia was not beating Missouri on the road last year. Georgia did not play very good against Kent State. Georgia did not look fantastic against a Samford team. That may have been 2 years ago. Regardless, Georgia was losing a football game to Missouri very well and easily could have lost a football game to Missouri last season. Could have happened. I'm sure y'all are probably the same people that said it then. Oh, this team can't win back-to-back national championships. We're losing to Missouri, barely come back and beat them. And you did. You did. This could be your Missouri game of last year. And I don't think we need to go back to that same mentality of 2015-16 where Georgia's always going to lose one game. 2019, you lose to South Carolina in this same exact game, the same way Georgia played. But champions find a way to win. And that's what happened in this football game. Second half, a championship team came out and found a way to win. So I'm not giving up on the Dogs yet. I want to temper the expectations of Mike Bobo. Give Carson Beck a break, okay? He's still figuring things out. He's been here for a long time, yes, but that doesn't mean he's been playing in competitive football games. When you're playing in the second half, third quarter, one quarter of football against UAB, and you're up 56-0, you don't have a lot to lose. When you're down 14-3, you have a lot to lose in the second half of a football game against South Carolina. And they found a way to get the job done. So I want to kind of take things down a notch, at least with that. Let's look at the keys to the game. These are the keys to the game that we wanted to see coming into this game. A lot of it is some of what we've already talked about. Deep shots, I want to see some of that happening, opening the playbook. Don't know if it was necessarily that as much as it was just Carson Beck, look downfield. And all of these keys to the game can be broken up in the first half and the second half because the first half Georgia team does not win a national championship this year. The second half Georgia team wins a national championship this year. That's what it takes. Again, champions have to find a way to win, and they did that. So deep shots, first half, no. Second half, yes. Look at there. It's a half difference. Running the ball, we did good. We really did well overall when it comes to running the rock in this game. We ran the ball for 189 yards, 3 touchdowns this week on 44 carries. Held South Carolina to just 53 yards on the ground. So we ran the ball good. I think we did great. Perimeter blocking, not that great in the first half, honestly. Second half, very good. I mean, there were a couple of plays where even though it was still a screen pass or a little swing out, toss to the side, our wideouts were blocking great on the perimeter in this game, especially the second half. So got to give that a check mark. Some of these, again, first half, no, but second half we got it going. Defensively, pass rush, again, we weren't getting home very well in the first half, but the second half we did a good job of that. Secondary was able to hold on with some guys in this, so I was glad to see that. A couple of bigger plays did happen in this game, but secondary, again, you're kind of hurting not having Javon Bullard in there as well. But in the end, hey, 2 interceptions in the third quarter and another in the fourth. We'll take that. Nothing wrong with that. So it may have only been 2 turnovers. I thought it was 3. Let me just double check this, because what I read here is 2 turnovers, but I thought we had 3 interceptions. Let me just double check this. No, it's only 2. Okay, so I was wrong. It was Tyke and Dan Jackson. That's right. Because the first one, had Tyke not caught it, I'm fairly certain Malachi Starks would have caught it if it wasn't for him. So one way or another, that ball was getting picked off. So 2 interceptions is actually what we ended up with. I was wrong on my number there. But regardless, secondary did their job. And then in the trenches, offensively, did not look good, but that's not what we're talking about. Defensively is what was the key to the game in the trenches. And we did great, really, to me, all game long. We were getting in Spencer's face. We were also busting through, but we just couldn't bring it home in the first half. We weren't getting him down like we wanted to, but the second half that turned around a lot. So overall, keys to the game actually went pretty well and turned out like we wanted them to. Now, score prediction on it, 42-10. Listen, what can I say? It did not end the way it was supposed to. Hey, look at here. Y'all get to see something live, something that I just realized on my screen is actually incorrect. I'm going to fix it while we're right here live. Look at there. We're 3-0. We're not 2-0. I just realized I didn't change that on the graphic. For you guys watching on YouTube, see, this is a reason to watch the YouTube channel. You never know what you'll get to see, even though that was probably incredibly boring. But regardless, 42-10 was the score prediction on this one. Clearly, that didn't happen. Did not happen. But, hey, Georgia, 24-14, I'll take that. That's a win. Championship teams find a way to win, and I was proud of that. So I was glad to see Georgia get the win in this one. Again, we've got to do better in the red zone. Back to my whole spiel there, the 2 things that I think we truly need to work on. We've got to score in the red zone, and we got to have a field goal kicker. It may be the guy that we've got up here right now. It may very well be him. But he has got to find a way to get the ball through the uprights. And I'm not just talking about kicking extra points. I'm talking about we got to have it. Why is my kicker not pulling up here? There, Peyton Woodring. Yeah, we have got to have field goals. When we drive all the way down the field, we got to have points out of it. And when you're 1 for 3, that doesn't do it. We cannot miss multiple field goals in a game like this. Extra points, obviously, you get those are chip shots, but especially at the half where a guy goes in and wins $1,000 for kicking a short field goal on the field, like as a fan and some kind of a contest they had going on. How many people you think were sitting there going, can we put a jersey on this guy? At least he's making the short ones. I'm not trying to push, and I'm not trying to harp on Peyton in this, but we have got to make field goals, and we've got to score when we get to the red zone. Last year, we were a good red zone scoring team. This year, right now, we're starting really, really crummy. Some of that is because of the missed field goals, but some of that is because we're just getting down there. Again, the field gets smaller. I understand that, but we still have to be able to score in the red zone. I don't want to become one of those teams again where we get down there, and it takes us, what was it, Florida a couple of years ago? We're on the goal line, can't score. We get a whole new set of goals, and we still cannot score a touchdown. We had to kick a field goal in 8 plays. I've never seen that where you cannot get a touchdown. You end up having to kick a field goal. But I don't want to become that team. So red zone, we got to score. Got to score. Carson, got to continue looking downfield. O-line has to continue to improve. And then we just got to get home on defense. I think the defense is starting to come together, which is exciting to see. That's good to see, especially we get healthy in some of these backing spots, get Javon back in there as well. Having Kamari back in there, he had a great game. Michael Williams had a great game. So seeing some of these other guys getting in there, Tyke Smith, it's great to see him. Dalen Everett, he's got to continue to work there on the outside as well. Smile Mondon, all of these guys pop. Seeing everybody in there, I think everybody's starting to gel, which is good. Now we just offensively, we've got to find some leadership, some spark, and we've got to find some guys who want to play football and get them in here to do that. Let's get to the weekly picks as we come out of the conversation about Georgia here. Here's where we end up. Not a very good week. Not a good week, and we're going to talk about why here in just a minute when we look at some of the games around the country, which is technically what I should have done before we did the picks, but I'm going to plow through those. Georgia took them over South Carolina. Like I tell you, if I would have taken the points, don't take them with me. I almost did in this game because of the 42-10 prediction. Glad I didn't because I'd have been sweating the entire time. But, hey, Georgia wins. That's a win. I took Tennessee over Florida. Oh, if they could have both lost, would have been awesome. But the fact that I picked Tennessee and they lost was even worse, and taking them in the points. So not a good look. I thought Mississippi State being at home would have had a little bit more fight, but LSU absolutely thumped Mississippi State. I did take LSU for the win, but I thought Mississippi State would keep it closer. They did not. LSU looked really good in this game. And then I took Ole Miss over Tech. They did that, but Ole Miss ended up pulling away. I shouldn't have given credit to Tech like I did, but Ole Miss ended up pulling away in the end and winning that one by like 25. So I ended up going 3-4. Hey, still a winning record. Still a winning record at 11-9 so far on the season. My top 5 coming out of this week we're going to get to here in just a minute, but let's look at some of the other games that were around the country. We've got some bigger games that are coming up this weekend too that we're going to check out when that time comes. Florida State, looking at these top 5, especially Florida State struggling with Boston College, but they win 31-29. Huge game. They're playing Clemson, I think, coming up this weekend, so that's a big one. Colorado, down to the wire, double overtime against Colorado State to win 43-35. Yeah, Duke over Northwestern, 38-14. Tennessee getting drummed by Florida, 29-16. And what is Josh Heupel doing? What a joke. Penn State over Illinois, 30-13. Again, these games just weren't very exciting. Iowa over Western Michigan, one of the bigger wins, 41-10. Michigan over Bowling Green, 31-6. Just wasn't a necessarily beautiful game. Washington over Michigan State was 41-7. LSU 41-14 over Mississippi State. Ole Miss over Georgia Tech 48-23. Missouri with the upset of number 15 Kansas State 30-27 on the 61-yard Mevis kick field goal to win by field goal 32-27. North Carolina 31-13 over Minnesota. Notre Dame continues to drum. They're looking good. Ohio State, yeah, they won. Oregon won. Oregon, Colorado next week is going to be a really good one. Oregon State, not all that great over San Diego State, but they won 26-9. Alabama over South Florida. Woof. 17-3. I know it was wet down there, but like I said earlier, it's wet on both sides of the football. My goodness. I told you guys coming in this one. I got them 9-3. It's looking pretty promising. They got to go back with Milroe because it just ain't working with these other guys. Texas didn't look great over Oklahoma, or over Wyoming, 31-10. It looked better in the end by that score, but it was not as good of a game as that looked. And then those are really the bigger games. Louisiana beat UAB 41-21, which is who Georgia's got coming up this weekend. Again, some of the other big games that we're going to look forward to as we get ready to preview UAB coming up at the end of this week. UCLA and Utah play. USC and Arizona State. Oregon State and Washington State will be a good one. FSU, Clemson, Colorado, Oregon, Miami and Temple, probably not. Ole Miss and Alabama, that's going to be a good one. Ole Miss traveling to Alabama. Let's see if that can finally happen for Lane there. LSU and Arkansas should be a good one. Georgia and UAB, yeah. Ohio State, Notre Dame, that's a huge one. Texas at Baylor could prove to be a big one after the way Texas played Wyoming this week, and Baylor just doesn't know what they want to do, whether they want to be good or not. Iowa, Penn State, North Carolina, Pitt, Central Florida, and Kansas State, and Cal and Washington. So some big games that are coming up this week that we're going to look at. This is the top 5 that I've got on this week. I'm keeping Georgia here at the top. Again, not necessarily the prettiest, but first of all, it's SEC football. Anytime you're playing an SEC opponent, things are going to be a little bit tougher. That's all there is to it. So I got Georgia at 1 because the champions find a way to win. I'm keeping Florida State at 2, and I know some people may go, now how do you do that? How do you keep FSU at 2 after playing Boston College the way that they did? Well, a lot of that is because at one point in this game, FSU was actually up pretty big. It had become like 31-16. And that defense, for whatever reason, decided to let Boston College right back into this game and made it a lot tighter game than it was. It wasn't necessarily the most beautiful thing, but Florida State, in the end, had a pretty good lead, and then they just let them come back. But they still won the football game. Michigan looked a little bit more. The thing about Michigan is they are consistent. Like every week, they're scoring at least 30. They're not really giving up a lot, but it's not. It just doesn't look like very beautiful wins. And you don't have to have beautiful wins as long as you're winning. But the way the Texas play Wyoming starting things off, I'm giving Michigan the jump of Texas just because of that. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the weeks to come, if that stays or not. But I'm keeping USC there at 5 just because of them having a neutral site. And I don't care if Ohio State scored 100 points yesterday. I'm going to keep USC right there. So that's what we've got on this weekend. Dogs are 3-0. we've got some work to do. We've got a lot of football to play to work on all these things that we got work to do on. So I'm not too concerned about it. I'm just glad to see some Georgia football, right? Hope you guys are too. Hey, make sure you guys like the video here on YouTube. Subscribe if you guys don't mind. Give us that 5-star review wherever you guys are listening on podcast. I greatly appreciate it. If you want to support the show, Patreon.com/Dawg Talk. You can look at all of this in the link of the description of the podcast if you guys would like to do that. But otherwise, we'll check in with you guys where we go to previewing UAB for this upcoming night game this weekend. Go Dogs.